So what is this course? This is not a basic anatomy course. That's what this course is. This is a kind of applied anatomy. We are going to look at how to bend, how to change, how to design. Mainly what this course is going to be about is playing. We are going to learn how to play with anatomy. And I think that that is the most important thing you could do for your anatomy education. That is the gateway to really cementing for yourself what you do and do not know. And it really is how you're going to make finished personal art out of the anatomy that you know. So why start with the arm for something like that when we have the whole body to choose from? I think the arm is a good place to start because we all have an image in our mind of what an arm looks like. You know, it's very iconic. You know, the flexed, strong bicep is a very iconic image. We all have some particular shape idea of what that looks like that we maybe don't have for something like the back or something like a leg. But at the same time, while we have that icon in our minds, we don't have very much specific information about the arm. Very few people can break down what's going on in the forearm, for example, right? And even a lot of artists can't. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. It gives us room to make things familiar and also room to really mess things up and not take a lot of hits for it. So I think it's a really good place to start covering the principles of playing with anatomy and get us ready for parts of the body that are maybe a little less forgiving, like torsos and heads. So in the hope that we can really get into how to play with this, all of the demos in this course are real time. And I wanted to do that because narrating while I draw allows me to very precisely explain why I'm making the design choices that I'm making in the moment in a way that's really hard to do in a sped up video. The tendency in a sped up video is to just sort of narrate matter-of-factly what you are watching yourself do in the playback. And you're going to see that with the real-time footage, there's opportunities for me to explain why I think I did something wrong, opportunities for me to kind of digress and make diagrams in the moment. And it's all stuff that I never would have remembered to do on a second pass going back on it. In order to do that, all of these demos are each individual demo, and you're seeing the demos on your screen right now that we're going to do for this series. They're all an hour or less, like the longest one is an hour, I think, but most of the information that we're going to get into is going to be explained in quick drawings like this. So this is where we're going to start. We're going to do some quick examples of drawing loosely into sort of random shapes and dreaming our anatomy into there. We're going to take plenty of digressions to do some diagrams and explain some technicals of anatomy, but we're not going to focus on that. Like I said, this is applied anatomy. We're going to use that as a basis to get into some rendering and contrast principles. Really, contrast is the secret sauce of rendering. If I give you those principles, you can figure everything else out on your own, really. We're going to use that as a basis to then talk about thick and thin arms. This is like the two big breakdowns. So we're going to look at really massy arms and then what happens when things get thinner, and just break down a lot of the concepts and proportional differences that happen as you thin things out and beef them up. And then we're going to end with looking at some designy arms. We're going to torture these things and come up with some weirdness based on the anatomy. So we got an arm made of wood. We've got a weird octopod looking arm, and finally a more magical, like elemental magma fire demo. And we're going to cover a lot of material in between all of those things and just talk about really draftsmanship. This really breaks down into a discussion of draftsmanship in a lot of ways. That's what design is all about. And I hope you guys find this helpful. And with that, let's go. I highly encourage the basic exercise of just making some dynamic, sloppy shapes. I need to emphasize that. Draw sloppy. Don't tighten up. Sloppy drawings give you an excuse to really play with shapes and bend them and treat them like clay. and to fit things into each other and intersect things and overlap things. You want that. You want to be able to do that. So throw down some shapes. And we're doing arms here, so we'll turn these all into arms. And taking these as your basic silhouettes, and these are very blobby right now, right? These silhouettes make very little illusion. This one makes no illusion to anything anatomical about the arm, right? These are just like teardrop shapes. Train yourself to read into them and dream an arm into them. This is a very good thing to do with any part of anatomical study, and to do it both on the macro and on the micro. You know, do it for arms separately, legs separately, torso separately, head separately, the full figure. You want to put it through its paces. Let's see what we could do with this one. I mean, you really have an infinite variety of views of the arm, bends, configurations, foreshortenings, to use as a way to solve these puzzles. And there's no right answer, obviously. And feel free to fail. You know, find some shapes that are really, you know, you found the limit. You can't find a way to fit an arm into it. With a little bit of imaginative application, you can find some way to get a distorted arm in there. So that's almost that. This one kind of looks like if you were this almost looks like a first person view of your own arm, right? Like you're looking down the length of your shoulder to your arm, to your hand grasping away from you. This is an exercise of pure imagination. Like anything, imagination can be trained and improved. Some people may have a naturally higher acumen or starting level for imagination and dreaming into things, but everybody can train it. And that's more important than where you start. So yes, twisting things, shoving things in there. God knows what I could do on this one. I made this weird paddle shape here. Just give it a swing. In these situations, this is usually where you find your most alien solutions. And that's good. So you can barely tell what's going on here, I know, but that's the ulna that I'm drawing there. Medial epicondyle, lateral epicondyle. Again, to reiterate, I'm just going to throw the real names around like that. So just a reminder, this is not a basic anatomy course. If you still need to learn basic anatomy, if words like that confuse you, hunker down, do it, learn it. It's almost like a weird bat wing kind of a thing, so I'm imagining that this orange area is like leathery wing. There's some sort of webbing there, and the rest is actually anatomical muscle and such. And really, you can see that it wouldn't have been hard for me to, I kind of indicated this little bat claw coming out over here. I could have just dragged that up and completely filled the shape that I did the initial sketch with. So find weird solutions. Find them, hunt them. This is a very Zen meditative practice. I love doing this. So how am I coming up with these shapes and solutions to transmorgifying the base muscles into these shapes? Again, years of practice and some amount of knowledge of the technical information and specificity of each individual muscle. So this is the base. The silhouette, the flow, the energy, the overall design, this is what controls the nature of your anatomy, right? Your anatomy wants to be a tool, a set of tools that allow you to fill and realize this overall bigger idea. And shoving your anatomical knowledge into these stranger shapes, this will really test you and show you what you don't know. You want that. And this should be fun. It should be fun the whole time, in fact. Usually, the point where it stops being fun is the point where you no longer know what you're doing. Right? You don't have a lot of practice at the part that you're doing. A level of ease and comfort at any particular step in the process keeps it fun. So use that as information too. Yeah, that's like a arm going. Do you get what I'm implying there? It's like going straight up and twisting and reaching over. It's like this is the back of the delt. This would be the armpit. Teres major and latissimus inserting there over the triceps. This is the chest coming down, the pectoralis. And then the head would be somewhere here. And obviously this is a monster, so he's very angry because they don't get enough vitamin D. You get it. Right? Something like that. Let's play with more silhouettes. So this is what you need to do to the poor arm. You must torture it. So now instead of doing these teardrop shapes, let's focus on making silhouettes that are making some allusion to what the internal anatomy will look like from the start, instead of what we did before where we made no illusion. We were just using abstract teardrops. Let's just throw something energetic, right? That looks like an arm. Simple silhouette. What's wrong with this silhouette? Well, I'm going to diagnose a bunch of my problems as I do this so that you guys can see how you should think about yours as well. These points kind of, they crash together. Too linearly. I don't know how, this is difficult to put into words, but if there was an axis going down this silhouette, that is almost too perpendicular. You see how it's making like a perfect cross right there? I would prefer if the energy and interaction between the middle line and these two pinch points was something more like that, so that it didn't make a perfect cross, but that there was some energy, you know? At a more acute angle. That's it's hard to convey that concept. It's something that you come to understand as you draw more and more. You need to sort of have insight into what kinds of energy you're portraying with every line. Every line, every single thing you add to a drawing makes a significant impact on the overall impression. See, I'm just redrawing this, drawing sloppy like I advocated. I'm looking for energy, looking for movement. Stuff like this. This looks over the top. It is over the top. It's balanced a little bit by this simple edge on the other side. But we don't have to worry about this being like too bumpy and weird right now, because when you go in and like draw all this stuff out, that tends to sap the energy out of it. So it's better to be, you want to veer on the side of the better mistake. You'd rather be too dynamic than not dynamic enough. Just adding some internal forms there to be a guide. So you see, I throw these silhouettes very loosely, very relaxed, going for pure shape, pure flow. just want to seek. That's very odd. You do want to go too far out and then give it an earnest attempt. You want to start building some taste and some familiarity with where the edges of your ability are, where when a shape gets too weird and can't be saved, you know? It's easy to not think in bends and action when you're just doing silhouettes. So that shape asks us to deal with big compression, really closing the arm as much as it can go. Long action line. And the overall silhouette flowing, following that action line. So you can see, get an idea for how this is going to ask a lot more from you than just doing the average arm over and over again 1,000 times. This is going to push you, test you, ask things of you that the average arm just never will. So when I start drawing into these things, every line that I put down, or most of them, I want to make even each line interesting as it goes down, right? So that one right there has kind of a hooky shape, right? You don't want to just do this over and over again. You want to do. You can practice wacky lines on their own, right? But these sorts of hooks and throws and stuff like that, you want to get comfortable with that, and you want to find excuses to put that kind of vivacious excitement into your anatomy somewhere. It can be small, you know, the way that the triceps lateral head hooks into its tendon gives you a great excuse to put some itchy shark tooth shapes in there that way, right there. And if you're interested in bettering your understanding of form, I can definitely advocate for, even when you're first putting things in, laying things in, play with hatching, put it in early, see the volumes early, have some sort of shorthand that lets you very quickly start thinking in value. Now, there's no way around this. If you want to do this well, you must do it a lot. A lot like a lot. Whatever you are thinking when you hear a lot, you need to quadruple it and then double that. And then you're still not there enough. You really need to practice quite a bit. A monstrous amount, truly. So you're going to start to see in the various solutions to these silhouettes that we threw down, to these flows, to these gestures that we threw down, you're going to start to see some of the archetypes that we're going to be going over. You're going to see buff arms, monstrous arms, skinny arms. I am drawing all of this from imagination right now. You do not need to do that. I mean, obviously these pushed silhouettes, you definitely do those from imagination. You're going to have a hard time. Well, no, you could spend some time practicing by copying other people who have excellent dynamic silhouettes and designs to their anatomy. But at a certain point, you really need to just throw it on your own without any reference. But these internals, like where I'm laying in anatomical landmarks and such, this stuff you can definitely use reference for. Please do if you're not very comfortable with it. I can only put this information down in a way that's helpful instead of detrimental because I've done it so many times. So let's even let's just fuzz some of this out and create some volume here so that I can show you that with very little time, and even with a base that is just absolute craziness, right? Just a random silhouette that you threw that is inhuman and exaggerated, and you have no real information, and it's likely anatomically impossible. As long as you put that energy in there and you're considering the power of the basics and you're thinking of shape and form, a pretty resolved solution is never far away. You know, look at that. It's getting there. There's no magic behind what I just did, where I was blurring things out here. I'm not really just blurring things out. You need to always be drawing when you do stuff like this. Like, even though I'm softening these very harsh lines that I made with the smudge tool, I am not just doing that by rote. I wish you could see. I wish I could put my hand over yours so that you could feel exactly what I'm doing. I wish I could hold your hand and like apply my pressure and just guide you, but I can't. So you really need to look closely here. I'm following the forms even as I'm smudging, right? In my mind, I'm not smudging. I'm not just smudging. I'm drawing. Always be drawing. Always be creating form. So even though I'm softening things, I'm following the muscles. I'm following the forms. It just so happens to be softening the lines as I do it. The second that you slip into just, oh, yeah, soft, you killed it. You ruined it. You ruined it. So yeah, already getting there. Soft, creating a hierarchy of forms, creating a hierarchy of contrast, putting down a base. It's all happening. And it really was not far away on the other side of that very cartoony silhouette. And we just laid some totally harsh lines on it, but because we were thinking in solid form and value. It all holds together. And then you can go over this, as much as you want. You can lower the opacity of your pen. And then take another pass here. So that it's not all soft. Oh, dog, don't do that. No, Fanny, quiet. So I'm creating subforms. I'm reestablishing the areas of contrast, putting in some secondary muscle striations, the niceties of which are the tail end of basic anatomical knowledge, What do I mean when I say that? Like knowing that the lateral head of the deltoid is a multipennate muscle and has an interlocking shape like that, while the anterior head of the deltoid is just split more simply in two. Knowing the difference between those two heads and the patterns of the muscle striations on each one, it should excite you to want to learn stuff like that, because every bit of it that you can remember and internalize and hold inside of you is only going to make your drawings more informed and beautiful. If you don't get excited by that, go find something that does excite you. Or don't worry about it. Just learn the part of anatomy that you need to know for the stuff that excites you. For someone who's interested in transforming anatomy, really twisting it around and doing a lot of wacky stuff with it, there's few things that could have higher utility. Also, the subtlety and beauty of the way that the actual human body bends and interweaves with itself and overlaps itself and creates odd shapes and concavities and convexities. I mean, it will set a bar in your mind for what it actually means to make something weird. A lot of people are really held back by the fact that they haven't studied anatomy with intensity, because what they think is weird or special is like actually laughably boring compared to even just the 100% realistic structure of the back of the forearm or something like that. Truly, I'm not fucking around. I really mean it. Yeah, so you can do a second pass like that. And then if you're drawing in pencil, that's what I do with pencil. I do passes where I stump out, take the pencil back and re-etch things into it. But you can also do it just like I'm doing right now in digital, where I took a second pass and now I'm re-softening all that stuff. And you can do as many passes as you want, as long as you remember ABD, always be drawing. Right now I am drawing. I'm not just softening what I did before. I'm using the smudger to create new forms. And I have the light in mind while I'm doing this. So when I'm, like, for example, on this unit of secondary pass that I did here, that shape right there, that group of hatch marks, when I am smudging that, my light is generally from up above. Wow, great light bulb, Stephen. My light is generally from up above in this drawing, right? So when I'm smudging, I will smudge this less intensely so that it has lower contrast, and I will smudge that more intensely so that it has higher contrast. I might have that backwards for digital, because in digital you don't make things darker necessarily as you smudge. What I just said is really more applicable to a pencil drawing, because on the stump there's graphite sitting on the stump, so the harder you press, you actually do make things darker. But hopefully you understand the principle that I'm trying to imply. I'm varying the pressure of my softening based on the principles of light and anatomy that are occurring. I'm not just softening. I really can't emphasize this enough, because hardly anybody talks about that, and it ruins 99% of the drawings in the world. So I'm varying my pressure there, going soft there, and and even if in digital, for example, this didn't get, that area where I'm pressing now, that didn't get darker from me pressing harder when I smudged, but it is very revelatory that I am on the form enough, that I am dreaming my form convincingly enough to myself that I automatically do that as I draw. You want that. You want to get there. Make it real. Make it real to you in your head. How are you going to make it real to others if it's not real to you? Really push it. Go crazy. Hypnotize yourself. Convince yourself it's real. Convince yourself that it's real. And convince yourself that it's exciting and real. You can be hard on yourself later. While you're drawing, be your own biggest fan. Absolutely love what you're doing. Get a rise out of it. Get pumped. Love it. If you don't do that, why will anybody else love it? No one will be capable of experiencing your drawing as intensely, any more intensely than you experienced it, right? If you experienced mediocre feelings the whole time while you were doing it and you were putting that into the drawing, that will define the limit for what others can feel for it. They will either be able to feel mediocrely excited about it or mediocrely disappointed by it. Not that you should care about that, but that's a different discussion. Don't worry about the disappointed part, but do care about the excitement part. If you want to convey excitement to your audience, you need to feel it quite a bit. All right. Let's look at this other one. Just wanted to make a point about how I wanted to just do a little extra work on that one, just to make clear that there is, I've said it multiple times, but on the other side of that simple silhouette lay the resolved arm. Right? You can clearly imagine how I would keep going on this and render every little bit of it and turn it into a guitar solo. You want it to be a guitar solo. You want every individual part of a good drawing to feel like a guitar solo. It just wants to rip out into the world and melt people's faces off. It might not actually be possible, but if you want to keep the whole machinery of creativity running in your life, there's some part of you that needs to believe it's possible. There's some part of you that needs to always hold on to the possibility that your drawing can burst onto the stage and rip some sick arpeggios and just make people freak out in the mosh pit. If you really want people to do that, I would highly advocate being a musician instead of an artist. So we can try to draw these all a little differently. Well, not all, but some of them. I like to keep that bicep pretty thin, side to side, so that it's really clear that it sits on top of these other meaty muscles, you know, the medial head of the triceps there, brachialis and tricep there. It's nice to keep it's kind of a cool stylistic look to keep the bicep pretty small and let it sit on top of those others. Snaky veins. Did I mention that all I'm doing right now is just having fun? You gotta have fun while you do this. We just laid down some very loose gestures, and we're putting pretty muscular but human-ish arms. Well, not this one. That big old tricep is pretty twisted, but the rest of these are pretty humanish. A bodybuilder could have that arm. That could wind up being very completely regular human. And this one is very long, but the hyperextension that's going on here with the bicep pushing up and then the forearm flowing the other way, that's pretty, you know, that's like a dancer pose right there. That's pretty human. We'll go into how to transmorgify into more specific directions in a bit. But I just want to show the basic process and the basic thinking. Form, shape, first shape, silhouette, gesture, and shape, right? The overall shape. And then on top of that, anatomy comes in as a tool to realize that. You need to keep that hierarchy straight in your head. I'm going to soften these inclines out and do some softer pencil shading over some of this. What can I use? Let's see if Bonobo chalk will work for us a bit here. So very softly, almost like I'm using like powdered graphite or something. Feeling the roundness of the muscle. I know it's a meme. Feel the form. But it's real, dude. It's a meme for a reason. You don't hit a high level unless you can do it. You just don't. Every artist who I know who can really resolve things to a very high level, what allows them to do that is that they can fall into it. And no part of what they're creating is a mystery to them, right? It can have any lens on it, right? It can be very stylized, very simplified, very realistic, very geometric, very twisted, very psychedelic. It can be whatever that artist wants, but all of them, you point at any part of it, they know what's going on. They know what's going on. None of it is a mystery to them. They know where that piece of surface sits in space. That's really what it's about. I'm not saying they know what muscle is producing every bump that they drew. They're probably designing things that don't have a real world analog. What I'm saying is that they're not confused about where things are in space and how they're interacting with others. How they're interacting with other things that are sitting in space. There's some people who react to something like that with a kind of despair. Like, oh no, I have to know everything. It just sounds so much. It's so overwhelming. It shouldn't be, right? Because it's not about it's not about reaching the end. The goal of all this is not, it's not like an all or nothing thing where you either got all the info into your head or you didn't, right? That's not why we make art. That's not why we do these things. So you truly, you choose. You draw the line absolutely wherever you want. So it shouldn't be overwhelming. You just need to find the edge where you're excited about it and where you're not excited about it. And it really must be exciting. It should be exciting because every bit of information that you get into your mind is improving your drawing and gives you a new exciting thing to put in drawings moving forward. Digital. One day you'll get there. For now, not so much. Really does not quite give the control of it. There's really few things that offer as much control as a nice sharp pencil, a real pencil on real paper. But you can see how I'm mapping things out and understanding the overall light and shadow interactions. Now, I don't draw this stuff, but I'm not confused by an inch of this. That doesn't mean I nailed it, right? That doesn't mean that my lack of confusion produced a complete one-to-one connection between my hand and my mental image, right? I'm not implying that. But if I needed to break this down, I'm not confused by any of this. I know the bicep sits there. I know that this little, oh, come on. I know that this tail there, Procreate is killing me right now. I'm going to punch it in the face. I know that this tail that's coming down is a tendon of the bicep that is splitting off into the aponeurotic extension of the bicep, and it's going to make like a little divot on the underside of the forearm there. I know the bicep has two heads, a long head and a short head, whose natures are reversed. The short head is longer and the long head is shorter. In the muscle bellies, it's actually the tendons that give them their names, most likely. I know Brachialis is hiding somewhere back there. I know that this is the medial head of the tricep sticking out there. This is the long head of the triceps. I know hidden somewhere back here is a tendinous section on the muscle belly of the tricep that is compressing it. I know Brachialis is sitting underneath the bicep here, giving it size and weight. I know the deltoid is interdigitating and diving under the Brachialis. They have a very strange interaction. As we discussed before, I know the multipennate formation of the lateral portion of the deltoid. Split head up there. This is the lateral head of the tricep poking out. Brachioradialis comes out flatly from between Brachialis and the lateral head of the tricep. Brachioradialis comes out from between them and then twists down to insert onto the wrist somewhere before the hand. Extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis. All of these get covered by abductor pollicis longus, adductor pollicis brevis. And this is all extensor group with all of its lovely little formulations and twists all soaring down the hand. That's the head of the ulna sticking out on the other side. And this is the medial epicondyle. Pronator teres is coming out from it, diving under brachioradialis, getting compressed by the aponeurotic extension of the bicep. All of the flexor group, fun, is coming out around here, getting softened by fat and such. And there is a neurovascular bundle running from within the armpit down here, and it splits off and explodes into all of these lovely veins that we could add later, all that stuff. So none of the stuff that I drew is confusing to me, but I didn't think of a bit of that. I did not think of a bit of that while I drew it. And the only reason I can do that is because I know it well enough. All I thought about was their shapes, their essences, what they can give me, the excitement of the excitement of the biceps, bulbous, bubbly head offset by that hooky little tendon, right? That's what I think about. I don't think about the details. I don't think about the exact anatomical interactions. All I think about is these big, exciting shapes that can do work for me. So I think of that. And I also know all the ways that this can get modified. I know that instead it could be shaped more like this and give me a really aggressive, like, God, that looks like a gum with like a dog tooth in it, right? But when you look at, really, right, it looks like some weird canine gum and that's its incisor. But if you look at a bodybuilder, it's quite common to see the bicep shaped like that, right? I know the bicep can give me that juice. I can't hand you that. I can't just spoon feed you that. That's observation. That's having a bit of the technical knowledge. It's mostly observation. It's mostly looking at lots of real people, photos of real people, doing life drawing. It's mostly that. You pick up on that stuff mostly from real life. But I know the bicep can do that. I know the bicep can, like it's going to do down here, I know it can stretch. And the interactions of its two heads can give me some nice overlapping subtlety. Right? Like I could get that little hook coming out and then this curve behind and then diving back behind that one. And I know that it can give me a very nice blocky shape on a muscular arm when seen from behind. And that's getting pushed out by its main bro, the brachialis. So for each muscle, I have like a library in my head. I have a visual library saved up of all of the ways that that particular muscle can do work for me. All of the shapes it can take, all of the weird niceties it can produce. That is always, it's subliminal. It's almost subconscious. It's hiding right under the surface of my cognition, but it is all there and I can dive into it when I need to. The trick is to just not let yourself get completely seduced by the purely anatomical usage of it, right? You don't want to think of it in terms of that's a quote unquote correct bicep. You want to think of it as that's a exciting bicep. That's an aggressive bicep. That's a biting, a stinging, a slashing, a cutting bicep, right? You want emotional reactions to these shapes, not scientific reactions. So we don't need to draw all of these out to get our point across about fitting things into pretty loose silhouettes. We don't need to, I think you guys are probably getting the point that even a loose gestural silhouette can be pretty well resolved just by putting knowledge over it. And that indeed it makes for more exciting drawings if that silhouette, that overall form, that overall shape has zest to it, right? That's a nice little tip. If you ever need to, everybody advocates against chicken scratching, right? Like any professor would say it's better to throw that curve cleanly like that, right? And it would be, but if you find that you chicken scratched something just to get some control over it, to control your curve, it's always a good tip is to then smudge it out digitally, or with your stump held like lengthwise in your hand on a piece of paper. And then that will unify it and actually give you a nice complex line, because the chicken scratching will create like little variations along the smudged line to make it a little more exciting. You know what's fun in this situation that I see sometimes when I look at that I've observed on real people? So the brachialis is getting really compressed here because the arm is bending at a tight angle. It's making this like heart-shaped compressed bulge. Sometimes on really ripped people, it actually, when it compresses, that bulge gets shot backwards, and it will actually overlap the straight tail of the tricep, which is just trying to mind its own business and get straight down to the olecranon, to the elbow. This is the tendon of the tricep that I'm drawing right there. And the olecranon is down here. Yeah, I love this. I've seen this quite a few times. That bulge will actually like vividly like curved overlap the straight tendon head, and I love it. I think it's such a cool look. It really it makes it look so mechanical, because they're not just like blending into each other. It makes it so clear that this one has a job to do and this one has a job to do, and they're not going to get nothing's going to stop them, you know? I love that. You want to curve the gesture of the deltoid, especially that side head, a lot, because it doesn't insert right into the side of the humerus. It kind of bends towards the front. And then you want to continue that energy with a nice bulging shape of the brachialis. You know, like in a wireframe, you want it to keep that energy flowing. You can use veins to keep energy flowing a lot. had the back of the deltoid too separated from the tricep. In a position like this all gets relaxed because it's the bicep doing the action. So you just want a more gentle curve. I like to exaggerate the condyles. The ulna, condyles. Get there's a little extension of the triceps tendon. That is nice to get a little hook right there between the condyle and the olecranon. Split that brachialis. Get some wrinkles indicated there. And then we can have a whole mess of extensive madness going on. So yeah, loose silhouette. You can dream your anatomy into it. Just take some practice. Tough view here. Keeping that triceps tendon angled in respect to the olecranon. So just to explain what I did here. And put a little more information so that I can explain more vividly. So this is Brachialis. This is the intermuscular septum, which is a good dividing line to know where the triceps sit, where brachialis and the biceps sit. So the intermuscular septum, which you can find on something like the lifted arm, running from between brachialis up to the medial epicondyle, gives you like a pretty straight-ish line. So the triceps are going to be on this side and biceps on that side. So this would be brachialis. And we're here. Biceps brachii. This is the long head of the triceps. This is the medial head of the triceps, and this is the lateral head of the triceps. This little effect right here is a tendinous section on the inside of the long head of the triceps. And back here we have an indication of the deltoid peeking out on the other side. The deltoid is like, if I'm drawing through this form, the deltoid is, right? It's inserting on the other side. And so yeah, we're seeing it here. And then again, back here. And then this is teres major. This is the latissimus. And there's some funkiness that we're missing here. We need to have like teres minor and the infraspinatus. The infraspinatus would be somewhere here. So that'd be some indication of teres minor, infraspinatus, because in reality, in a view like this, you wouldn't see this much information, like because I'm drawing this out of my head. I know realistically in a view like this, the curve would be much simpler and this stuff would actually be occluded. It would not occluded, but it would be rounding around the form. You wouldn't see it in the front. But the way that I indicated it, if that's the deltoid goes over infraspinatus, or at least its tendinous section goes over infraspinatus. So in this imagined view that I did, yes, you would most likely see those two muscles there. So again, that's a confusing view, but you want to be able to dominate confusing views like that. You want to know enough anatomy that none of that's a mystery to you. But again, while I sketch those lines in, and think about that. I was just feeling the forms. I've done that enough times that I just know how things will flow, and I know how it's very useful to think of how muscles are trying to get where they're going, right? That's why it's very useful to know the origins and insertions for all of the muscles, or have at least a general idea of them. It really adds a huge workload to know all of, on a very granular level, all of the origins and insertions, but helps you get the flows, helps you know where stuff is going. So, and I did that all on the same layer. Classic. I think you guys get the idea on that one. I'll just, will I make it? Will it go? Will it undo it all? Could it be? It did. It undid it all. Good job, Procreate. Yeah. And then, so, pronator teres, diving over that way. So Brachialis would be overlapping it somewhere here. We've lost our silhouette here, so things are getting pretty boring. Flexor group coming from underneath, beat it up with tendons and bellies interacting. We can have that be bigger. We could say that is the edge of the bone, and then maybe that's extensor carpi ulnaris sticking out from the other side. Our tortured hand doing whatever it will in this view. Maybe his head is like somewhere like this. He's like, woe is me. Good golly God. The stock market. Stock market, please. You get what I'm saying. So, while I doodle on this long arm here, let's just wrap up what we went over here. Anatomy must be subservient to your overall flows and gestures. That is the way to get better things. And your overall flows and gestures can be very simple and energetic and just thrown like you see here. And then if they have the juice, if they have something in there to get you excited and to get you pumped and to convey some energy, some flow, some gesture, you're free to dream all the info into them that you want after the fact, and they'll resolve. You can figure it out. And that's unless you're doing something that's specifically supposed to be, hyper realistic, in which case, this will never come off as hyper realistic, right? Those are just, no one's triceps going to come out that far. But if you're in a realm of play, you're always free to do that. And, don't be afraid to show people what they didn't know they wanted, right? Even if you're in a community that really values realism over everything, give it a swing every now and then. Surprise them, show them some distorted stuff. And if you put sort of this realistic modeling and light and shadow on top of it, you'd be shocked how often people are like, maybe my prejudices were unfounded. Perhaps we really can do whatever we want. It's nice, like something like the medial epicondyle and anatomy book. It's always going to be just like indicate as like circular or something like that, but just dream a shape into it, right? Like I like to make it a nice triangular thing so that it has something more exciting going on when I render it. So did I scare you with all those diagrams and all those muscle names? Don't worry about it. This is an introduction. We're making a point that you can throw whatever kind of silhouette you want and dream anatomy and quote unquote realism into any wild silhouette. Now that I have made that point, I'm sure I will still throw some diagrams and such over things as we go through these different archetypes of transformed anatomy, because I can't help it. I just find it super interesting, and I do think it's very explanatory. But we don't have to go super intense with it. We've made the point. We can focus on, there's two things we can focus on moving forward, and that's being more loosey-goosey and the fun to be found in going loosey-goosey. And we can discuss the niceties of anatomy as it bends and twists. And there is really the realm where I'll be able to teach you guys a lot of little fun details. Because it's really hard to catch on to those details without encountering them while drawing the moving, twisting anatomy. That's really where those things live. And I'll put a list of recommendations out there for where to go if you want to learn the technicals of anatomy. If you really haven't encountered it, or you just feel like you haven't found good stuff, I'll just talk about it briefly right now. But I will make a list somewhere. Take a good class if you can with a master who focuses on teaching the foundations. I learned from Ray Bustos. I can highly recommend him. He has instruction on a lot of the big online art teaching sites. So I know he has classes on Gnomon Workshop. He has classes on New Masters Academy, if I'm not mistaken. He's a great teacher, great guy. And he's excited, and he never stops being excited. He will try to infect you with his excitement for anatomy. There's also teachers like Scott Eden, Ryan Kinsline. These guys go around the world and they teach workshops and really just try to bring base anatomy knowledge to as many people as possible. So that's definitely if you're serious about it, learning it with a teacher in person or online is really the best way to get the foundational knowledge, because they can just answer your questions very specifically. I studied with Ray for years to get even the, I don't know everything. He knows everything about anatomy. I am not on that level. And even after years of studying with him, I'm not on that level. But and then on top of that, you subsidize with book knowledge. So I can highly recommend a lot of the classic books. I mean, if you look up best anatomy books, there's going to be a lot of classic books, but some standouts that don't get mentioned enough. One of the best reference books is Strength Training Anatomy by Frederick Delavier. That's one of the best references, because the diagrams are so clear, and the diagrams are in poses, and there's tons of them. That really, I don't know, for me, that book replaced a lot of the other recommendations that I had. And it's not focused on artistic anatomy, though. It's focused on, it's strength training anatomy. It's for people who want to exercise, but the diagrams are beautiful. The person who did, Frank Delavier, is a great artist and made some lovely diagrams. It's really just a great reference. If you want reference for more specifically anatomy in artistry, Elliot Goldfinger's Anatomy for Artists, or Artistic Anatomy. If you look up Elliot Goldfinger, it'll pop right up. His book is the best textbook on anatomy. It breaks down every muscle individually. It's a great reference book. And for draftsmanship, not the technical knowledge, still the oldie is the goodie, George Bridgman. You need to stay on top of him while you learn him, but he will basically teach you how to draw like Frank Frazetta. He'll show you the blocks and the forms and just hammer it into your head with his lovely, exciting drawings that you need to make shapes in space. That's the main thing he teaches you. And I think at some point, years and years ago, I copied like every drawing in the complete Bridgman guide. It's a good practice, and you don't have to copy them exactly. And there's really not that many of them, but you grab one of his books, just copy them. You don't need to necessarily read the material, but it will affect your draftsmanship, and you'll learn quite a lot about what you need to do to make shapes in space. Okay, so that's the general overview. That is the basic process of what we're going to be doing. And we've answered the big questions, which is focus on form and focus on shape, silhouette, and form first. Then worry about anatomy, because you can really fit it into any shape. You can find a way to dream it into any shape. And that a resolved version of anything is hiding on the other side of even a simple sketch. So now let's dive into some of the archetypes. Let's go look at some of the niceties of a particular kind of arm.